The world around you is connected. Your phone, your computer, even the lamp in your room, all whispering through the air in an invisible language. It's something we use every day. Yet few ever stop to wonder, where did this invisible thread begin? Tonight, we'll trace it back, not to Silicon Valley, but to the quiet pulse of radio waves, to distant experiments, and to the minds who dreamed of sending messages through the air. So, close your eyes. Let's drift back to the dawn of the invisible connection. In the 1860s, long before the word wireless was ever spoken, a Scottish physicist named James Clerk Maxwell sat surrounded by chalkboards. On them, symbols, curves, waves, equations. He believed that light itself was a kind of wave, an electric whisper traveling through the air. Decades later, a young German scientist, Heinrich Hertz, built machines that proved Maxwell right. In 1887, in a quiet lab, he made a spark jump between two metal spheres, and another spark appeared on the other side of the room. No wires, no strings, just air. That tiny spark was the first wireless message ever sent. Hertz had no idea what he had started. "It's of no use whatsoever," he once said. But others saw the future in that spark. Among them was an Italian inventor, Guglielmo Marconi. He was only 20 years old when he carried his crude transmitter onto a foggy field and pressed the key of his telegraph. Click! A signal traveled through the mist. A receiver on the other side of the hill clicked back. The world had just become smaller. In a few short years, Marconi would send messages across the Atlantic. Ships could now call for help through storms. Empires could speak instantly across oceans. The air was no longer empty. It was filled with voices. By the 1940s, the world was once again at war. And in war, every whisper mattered. Scientists in Britain, America, Germany, all raced to find a way to see without sight. They called it radar. Invisible pulses of radio waves sent into the sky, bouncing off aircraft miles away. It was here, in the glow of cathode screens and the hum of antennas, that the foundation of Wi-Fi was truly laid. Among those who studied radar was a young Australian engineer named John O'Sullivan. Decades later, his curiosity about how waves scatter and reflect would lead to something the world had never seen: a way for computers to talk through the air, cleanly, clearly, effortlessly. But in those dark years of war, no one was thinking about laptops or smartphones. They were thinking about survival, about detection, about silence and noise. Still, even in war, invention never sleeps. And when peace finally returned, the world kept its new power, the power to reach across the air. From Maxwell's chalkboard to Marconi's spark, to the radar's invisible eye, each step brought us closer to the moment when information itself would float through space. The war had ended. The world was rebuilding, cities rising, hopes returning. But something else was awakening too. Machines were learning to think. In the late 1960s, in the far-off islands of Hawaii, a group of scientists from the University of Hawaii had a dream: to connect their computers spread across the islands without using cables that could be easily damaged by wind or ocean. Their project was called Aloha. It was simple and beautiful. A computer would send its message into the air and wait. If no reply came, it would try again. That rhythm, transmit, listen, retry, became the heartbeat of modern Wi-Fi. Setting on a warm tropical night, glowing monitors in small university labs began to blink in unison. The first wireless computer network had been born. AlohaNet was small, but its idea was vast. Across the ocean, in America's mainland, engineers at Xerox were working on something they called Ethernet. It was the wired cousin of Wi-Fi: fast, stable, industrial. But even they knew, someday, the wires would have to go. The 1980s arrived with bright plastic computers and beeping modems. Offices buzzed with the sounds of connection. but always through cables, walls, and plugs. Still, engineers kept dreaming. What if computers could talk anywhere? One of them was Vic Hayes, a Dutch engineer who would later be called the father of Wi-Fi. Hayes led a small team at NCR and later Lucent Technologies, trying to make wireless communications stable enough for real use. Not in labs, but in homes, cafes, and airports. In 1997, the first Wi-Fi standard was born, known simply as IEEE 802.11. It was slow by today's standards, barely 2 megabits per second, but it was magic. For the first time, people could send messages without cables. The air itself had become a pathway. Then came the revolution. In 1999, a small company called Apple released the iBook, the first consumer laptop with built-in Wi-Fi. They called it Airport. During a live demo, Steve Jobs stood on stage, holding the iBook in one hand, walking across the stage with no cables attached. The crowd gasped. The laptop was connected, invisibly. That moment changed everything. Within a few short years, Wi-Fi spread through homes, libraries, airports, entire cities. Cafes filled with quiet clicks of keyboards. Students studied together, connected through invisible threads. Lovers sent messages across oceans, carried by waves that no eye could see. The dream that began with Maxwell's equations and Hertz's sparks had finally come true. The world was wrapped in invisible light, and soon it would begin to think for itself. The year was 2000. A new century had begun, not with thunder, but with a gentle hum. The hum of routers, modems, and the quiet heartbeat of Wi-Fi. At first, Wi-Fi lived only in offices and schools, a tool for work, not wonder. But soon, it slipped quietly into living rooms, kitchens, bedrooms. The air became alive with data, emails, voices, photographs, laughter. The world didn't even notice at first. But within just a few years, the invisible network had grown around us like a digital atmosphere. You could sit in a cafe, your face lit by a small, glowing screen, and speak to someone thousands of miles away, instantly. The silence between people had been bridged by invisible light. And so began the age of connection. In 2007, a man walked onto a stage holding a small, smooth rectangle in his hand. His name was Steve Jobs, and his invention was called the iPhone. It wasn't just a phone. It was a pocket gateway to the entire world. For the first time, Wi-Fi wasn't just a convenience. It was essential. Photos, maps, conversations, and entire lives began to flow through the air, through those same invisible waves first imagined more than a century before. Narrator, thoughtful. Wi-Fi became so natural that we stopped seeing it as a technology. It became air, as normal and necessary as breathing. The 2010s brought something new. Not just people connecting, but things. Refrigerators whispered to phones, light bulbs learned to listen, and doorbells could see. The network became self-aware in a quiet, collective way. Billions of tiny connections forming one global organism. Some called it the Internet of Things. Others called it the beginning of digital consciousness. Narrator, slow, steady voice. In every home, in every streetlight, every hospital, every farm, there were signals. Tiny, constant pulses of data passing silently between machines and minds. Subtle heart joins the background. The same air that once carried voices now carried the pulse of civilization itself. Late at night, when the world sleeps, the networks keep talking. Silent streams of messages flow above our beds, around our cities, through the clouds. Invisible, constant, alive. We no longer see where one person ends and the next begins. Connection has become our nature. But perhaps the true magic of Wi-Fi is not in technology, but but in what it reveals about us. The endless human desire to reach out, to connect, to understand, and to be understood. From Maxwell's equations to Hertz's spark to Jobs' wireless world, every leap was powered by that same yearning, to make distance disappear. Today, Wi-Fi surrounds us. It carries not just our data, but our memories, our emotions, our lives. And soon, as artificial intelligence begins to dream through the same networks, we will ask new questions. Where does the human end, and where does the signal begin? For now, we simply exist, together, in the quiet hum of the connected world. The gentle sound of static wind remains. The silent connection continues.